Hi, and welcome to Two Queens and a Joker, my narcissist ex and me. My narcissist ex is still sick and not able to record yet, so I am doing another one by myself. But I assure you she will be back as soon as she's feeling better. And I look forward to that. I really do miss her. But I am Brenda. I am a licensed therapist in a few states, and I work solely with survivors of narcissistic abuse. And what I thought I'd talk about today, I do have an upcoming class on this that I've mentioned before. The class is for adult children of narcissistic parents. And it is a topic that comes up a lot in the therapy that I do with individual clients and in the groups that I run too. So I want to go through some top questions that come up that adult children ask about being raised by a narcissist, basically. So I'm going to go through those. I welcome your comments and any feedback you have. If there's other questions that you have that I can answer, I'm more than happy to do that. These are some that I've heard. I'm always willing to hear more and see if I can help. So the first one I had in mind is people think looking back and saying, was it really that bad? Was it so bad that, I was really abused, or what kind of language are they using around it? Or was I really neglected? Or am I just being dramatic about this? And I think one of the reasons this question is so common is because narcissistic family systems train kids to doubt their own perceptions and downplay the harm that they've experienced. We tend to downplay what we've experienced and over explain everything, which I'm guessing that if you've been raised by narcissists, you can understand that in a big way. And I think that just comes from a long history of being doubted or being told that you're wrong or you're crazy or you're too sensitive or all of the things that you heard growing up. So I think in adulthood, this is a way that this shows up. Child of a narcissistic parent, over explaining is such a big one. A lot of us are still, I think, trying to prove ourselves. We're trying to prove that we're not lying. We're trying to prove that what our perception was is valid. I think we gaslight ourselves quite a bit too. So I think all of that's important. So the other thing I want to talk about too here before we go in much further, it doesn't matter if your parent was diagnosed clinically or not. If you're noticing a strong lack of empathy, very selfish behavior, gaslighting, lying to you over and over, always setting the bar higher and higher for you, making you feel less than or that you have to earn love, those are big red flags. It doesn't matter. The lack of empathy is the biggest thing because narcissistic people or narcissistic trait people don't have empathy. And that's what children need. That's what you needed. That's what adults need for that matter. But as a child growing up, you deserved unconditional love and you didn't get that with a narcissistic parent. Another thing is, so another question that I get often is guilt about boundaries. Why do I feel so much guilt when I set boundaries or go low or no contact? And I think the answer to this is that we've never been allowed to have a private life. If you're grown up with a narcissistic parent, there's an enmeshment. They think they have a right to everything you are involved in, to know about everything that you're doing. And of course, to some degree, parents need to be really involved with their children as they're young. But as they get older, the kids need to differentiate. They need to learn who they are as a growing person, an adolescent, and into adulthood. And a narcissistic parent does not let that happen. They stay glued to that child and mesh with that child well into adulthood. This will never end unless there's boundaries set with the parent. And we can feel guilty about that because, again, we've had a whole lifetime of boundaryless relationship with our narcissistic parent. We have to step out of that family system and that dynamic to do something that's very unacceptable in that system. And it feels weird to us. And we are going to feel guilty about it. The thing is, though, you will not heal until you have boundaries because you will keep getting hurt over and over and over again because a narcissist cannot respect your boundaries. And again, it's not for them to listen to say, okay, yes, I agree with your boundary. They're not ever going to do that. It's you having a consequence that you put in place for yourself if a boundary is crossed. And what that means is reducing contact, saying, I'm not going to talk to you about this. It can be little things. And we're going to go over this a lot in the class that I'm doing, a whole section on boundaries. And you don't have to go no contact if you don't want to. That's not like a rule, if you're healing from narcissistic abuse and narcissistic parents. You can have low contact with strong boundaries. You can't have low contact with no boundaries because then you will just be back into high contact and then maybe even feel the need and desire to just cut it off completely, which is going to come with its own set of guilt and emotion around that. But go back to guilt. Guilt is a feeling, not a fact. Confronting them often backfires with their denial, rage, victim stance, smear campaigns, all of the things that you've probably experienced all along. That can't be what stops you from having boundaries. Every single relationship needs to have boundaries in it, not just relationships with narcissists. So you can see if your healthiest relationship needs boundaries, why your unhealthy relationship with a narcissistic person would need them even more. I hope that makes sense. Another thing is, why am I such a people pleaser? Honestly, this is a very, very common thing for children of narcissistic parents. And saying no without panicking is probably a real foreign concept, but no is also a boundary and a complete sentence. But people pleasing is very, very common for survivors of narcissistic abuse when your parent was the original narcissist in your life. The people pleasing, in my opinion, comes from always having to scan for the narcissistic parent's mood. What were they going to be like? When they walked in the door, when they came home from work, what did you notice? Were you on high alert? Were you panicking? Did you have to make yourself busy when they walked in so you didn't get in trouble for sitting around? Things like that. That stays with you. That panic in your nervous system stays with you well into adulthood. And we try to mitigate that as much as we can. So what we'll do is try to people please. If we do this kind of out of a habit, we don't intentionally say, I'm going to do whatever I can to people please this person, but it's just a habit to keep a sense of safety, because that's what safety felt like to us when we were children. If we were aware, kind of acquiescing to whatever the narcissistic parent wanted, making sure that, everything was just how they wanted, you can see how that can lead to learning how to scan people and people please to make sure that we stay on their good side, even if they're safe people for us. That's a tough one. People pleasing and the fawn response those are pretty much the same thing. So it's really a survival skill. I mean, if you think of fight or flight, freeze or fawn, those kinds of things, those are survival skills. And we learn those early in childhood. I don't know if you ever look at social media videos of little kids, you can kind of see when they're performing, you can see like little looks on their faces sometimes, like, am I doing it right? Am I making my mom happy? Am I making my dad happy? That kind of thing. Um, I don't know. I notice that when I'm watching videos. Most of them are really cute, but some of them, they make me kind of worry for the child. Anyway, so another one, why rest can feel unsafe and being easygoing is sometimes a trauma costume. I've written a blog post about this on the narctrauma.com website about how low maintenance women seem to be ideal targets for narcissistic men. And I'm sure this applies the other way around for narcissistic women and low maintenance men. But being easygoing means maybe to a narcissist that we are manipulatable, if that makes sense. They can see that we're eager to please, that we're eager to put them first, all of that stuff. So I think that really does kind of open a gateway for narcissistic relationships later on. And I've said this a million times. Oftentimes people come to therapy because they're in a narcissistic romantic relationship with me anyway. This is what I've noticed with my therapy clients. And as we do therapy and as we kind of get to understand better what's happened in their relationship, they will start to realize this is not the first narcissist in their life. So we often find that, one or both parents had some traits or were full blown narcissists, or even worse, a sociopath. But this is a very common sequence that I see happening. We've been trained to know how to behave with a narcissist. So then a potential romantic partner in the wild, so to speak, they're going to hone in onto us right away. They're going to know what to look for, and we're going to fall for it because it's so familiar to us. It's not a life sentence. This doesn't have to go on forever, but we just have to start with awareness before we can change anything. So another one, why do I struggle with identity, confidence, and decision making? I mean, you can probably draw your own conclusion here after the things I've said so far. We did not have the ability to develop an identity, to develop any self-confidence, to develop any confidence, nor were we typically allowed to make a decision without it being questioned, much less, anybody following through with any decisions that we made. But as a child of a narcissistic parent, making a decision, even if no one challenges it, in the future, as you get more independence or you're out on your own, we still have that self-doubt. And then I think we're also so afraid of making the wrong decision. And we've had a lot of grief in our lives. We've been treated poorly, and it's left its mark on us. And that's not to say that, we can't heal from that as we get independent and can do our own healing work. But we walk into adulthood with a lot of pain. And most of the time, we don't even realize how much pain we have. So worrying about making the wrong decision is very heavy on our hearts, on our shoulders is a heavy, heavy weight to bear. It's just chronic self-doubt, imposter syndrome. Many of us experience this. Shame is the underlying emotion for not only the survivor of narcissistic abuse, and we come to this with a great deal of shame ourselves, but it's also the underlying emotion for the narcissist. I will stake my flag on this hill. I believe this full heartedly. Shame runs for both of us. It just shows up in different ways. I think there's also a fear of being seen, right? We're so used to being under the microscope of a narcissistic parent, being judged by every little thing we do, what we wear, how our hair looks, did we put makeup on, all of that stuff, right? So we're so worried about always being under this microscope. We don't want to be seen. So that stops us from making a decision. Somebody asks you, what do you want to eat? Oh, I don't know. What do you want to eat? And I know that's a silly, small example, but it's a real one, right? What if I choose something they don't want to eat? What if they don't like the restaurant that I'm going to suggest? I'll just let them decide, right? It's easier than going through all of that rigmarole in your brain. Okay, that's probably enough for that one. Another question, number 5 out of my list here. What were the roles in my family and why do my siblings remember it differently? Holy cow, this is a big one. This is true in my family. This is true with many of the clients that I work with. It's a big deal for most of us. So commonly I'm asked about the golden child versus the scapegoat dynamics. And that's kind of one extreme to the other of what the roles are. They're all bad. Even the golden child, it may sound like it's the ideal label to be given in by the narcissist in your family of origin, but they're all bad. That is not meaning that you're being treated better. You're being treated differently with a different set of standards. It's all bad though. These dynamics in families there's a lot of triangulation. So narcissists pitting one person against the other. So there's that triangle. Siblings can have totally different realities in the same house because of this, because of the roles that they were assigned by the narcissist. So a golden child is going to say, no, I was praised by mom all the time. Mom was always bragging about me, that kind of thing. But mom was bragging because it made her look good, not because she was proud of you. And the scapegoat or the forgotten child is like, that's not the mom I grew up with, right? So that you can see how the experience can mean a different perception of childhood for each child. Nobody comes out unscathed, though. And really, if you think about it, this isn't like growing up in a normal family. It's growing up with a hierarchy. So while the golden child seems to get the best treatment, they really don't, like I said, but they get the most praise, always with conditions, but they do get the most praised, which can on the surface seem like a good thing. It's not. Okay, so number 6, was I parentified? Probably. Why do I feel responsible for everyone's emotions? This is what parentification does to us. Not to mention the people pleasing, right? This is kind of a double way that this shows up. Parentification is a big deal and it absolutely happens, I think, in every single narcissistic family dynamic. Narcissistic parent, no matter how old they are, is emotionally immature. The narcissism, in my opinion, again, develops because there was emotional abuse or neglect typically in their family of origin. So at some point, they stop growing emotionally and figure out how to be in their own version of survival mode. So the emotional development is not happening. It didn't happen. And they stay stuck at typically a very young age. And I always tell my clients, if you have a narcissist in your life and you see them start raging at you or having, some kind of meltdown, put an age on that meltdown. You will then see probably about when it was in their timeline that they stopped emotionally growing. And if you think about the way a narcissist rages, it's usually throwing fits like a young child, and it's often really a young age, like single digits. So it can tell you a lot about what you're dealing with when you can put an age on the rage. But again, going back to that, so a narcissistic parent has this emotional intelligence age of about maybe 8, 9, 10. You're 14 and you've been studying other people your whole life. You are definitely more mature emotionally and carrying the weight of that maturity in the relationship with your narcissistic parent. So that's what makes you parentified. This is a topic that's a big deal, especially for women who are emotional support for a parent. As we get older, we often end up in caregiving roles too because we have families and we become mothers and that kind of thing. And we may end up over functioning for everybody. We burn out, we get resentment, all of that kind of thing. We don't ask for help because that's just not been a reliable thing for us in the past. And we're carrying way more of a load than we actually need to. So the overfunctioning piece is such a big deal. And I could do a whole episode just on that. But the overfunctioning piece, you'll probably relate to this. Many of us, we got this degree. Oh, that wasn't enough. Now we have to go back to school and get this degree. Or we got this promotion at work. Oh, and I still need to, strive to show that I'm worthy of the next promotion. And that's all we focus on, or we're working all the time. Which can also be kind of an addiction, a process addiction. Feeling productive keeps us out of fight or flight, probably, or it's our way of being mobile in the way flight would be mobile, if that makes sense. So if you think about being in fight or flight mode, your amygdala's firing, it's telling you you're in danger, which most of us feel most of our lives growing up in a narcissistic family. Feeling that kind of danger alarm going off in your brain, our first impulse is to move, right? This is like going back to caveman days. Our first impulse is to run away from the danger. That's what your brain's doing. But the mobility changes because we're not being chased by tigers anymore, or bears or whatever it is. So our movement turns into something else. Maybe we go for a run, maybe work. That's my thing, is workaholic. Like, it's ridiculous. Workaholic, lots of different things. Sometimes it goes into kind of danger seeking behavior, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but I just mean things like skydiving and bungee jumping off a bridge, things like that. Like, it can really get carried away. Again, not saying that everybody that does that is running away from something, but you can see how that would appeal to somebody whose nervous system needs that mobility to feel safe, basically. Next question is, why do I keep ending up with narcissistic partners or toxic friends, coworkers, that kind of thing? Oh boy, if I had a nickel for every time I heard somebody talk about this, I'd have a lot of nickels. But really, it happens because it's what's familiar. You can walk into a job interview and you won't even realize it. You won't realize it in the moment, but maybe you clicked with somebody really quickly, or the whole environment gave you this familiar feeling. And because it's familiar does not mean it's safe, right? But it's familiarity is kind of what our body craves. We know how to act in this situation. We know what to do. We know how to play this game. So all the pieces kind of come together without us seeing the big picture. So it's the familiarity that I think attracts us to a certain type of person because it's familiar, right? We know this person. We know this personality type. We know how to act with this person. There's some banter and things like that can be very easy to come by in the beginning of these relationships, which can feel really good. It can feel pleasant. It can feel like you're really connecting with somebody, but it's not what it appears. It's really about a piece fitting into a terrible puzzle that you have. And we want to throw the whole puzzle away and have a healthier puzzle to work with. Yeah, familiarity feels like home to us. It can feel like the place to land. And you can imagine, as you meet somebody who's a potential romantic partner, how intoxicating that can be, right? Even if there's red flags, that familiarity just takes over. It's like biologically leading us to be with that person. So it's a pretty big deal and something to pay very close attention to. Okay, enough about that. So number 8, am I going to become like them? Boy, this is another one. If I had a nickel for every time I heard some version of that question, it's very common. And you've probably noticed in your lifetime behaving like one of your narcissistic parents or the narcissistic person in your family or people in your family. If you think about it, we are modeled a certain behavior when we're developing, right? The adults in our life, the adult caretakers in our life are modeling behavior of, this is how you act like an adult. As a child, you don't know any better. That's the person who's, you're the duckling walking behind the mama duck. You kind of imprinted on them for the time being, not forever, but you don't know any better. That's what you're following. And as you evolve and develop, hopefully you kind of pull away from those toxic ways of thinking and behaving and develop your own ideas, your own morals and ethics and all of that stuff, and your own code of values that are important to you and that you want to live your life by. But as we kind of weed through that weed through that time in our lives, if it happens, we will start to see, oh my God, yeah, I used to say this, or I used to say that, or I used to act like this, and I used to believe in this, that kind of thing. It's because it's what you were taught, right? As we get healthier, and even if that's the differentiation, you go off to college, you get married, something like that, and or you get at your own place, whatever it is, when you've gotten some independence and you kind of start to have a bigger view of the whole picture versus this, I'm too close to the picture to see what's going on, you start to see where the toxicity is and how you want to purge that from yourself. Because you are saying or doing things that are similar to your narcissistic parent does not mean you're a narcissist. The fact that you're noticing it is a huge green flag. That is a great thing to be noticing. And moving toward making change toward the positive, toward empathy and kindness, which the narcissistic parent does not have, not in a true way, is how you heal. And it's how you make sure that you're not following their path. It has to be intentional. It's very hard to break a cycle. And I used to think you could do it in one generation. I thought, if a child's raised by a narcissistic parent and they realize what happened and then they have children of their own and I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that to my child. It's not that simple. There's a lot of things that need to be worked out as you go through every phase of your own child's life. And you've never dealt with a teenager when you've only, your child's been under the teenage years. And then it's a whole different dynamic as children do start to differentiate, which just means finding themselves, basically. We have to kind of adjust and learn along with them of how to parent them in those different stages of their life. So as we do that, I think we kind of come up against our own roadblocks and we adjust, right? We figure it out, but we may not figure it out until we've already done a little bit of damage, but hopefully we are taking accountability and responsibility for the damage or pain that we've ever caused our children. And that is another one of those things. That's a very different behavior from what a narcissistic parent would do. So we break the cycle slowly in parts, in little bits every day for years and years and years. And then the next generation gets a little better. And then maybe the generation after that, whole different dynamic. I don't know yet. I hope that's the case. Tolerating emotion is a big deal too, right? So if you're raised by a narcissistic parent, you probably don't know how to emote very well, or you didn't, at least, unless you've done a lot of work on that. So emotions in narcissistic families can feel very scary to have because, why are you crying? Why did you sigh? Why? Why are you acting like that? What's wrong with you? Those kinds of things, right? So we just learn to shut it down. It's not safe to have emotions. That's what we learn. And we can easily carry that into the families that we create or the relationships that we find ourselves in. And that's something that I think is incredibly important to work on because every single human being on this planet has emotions. Every single one of us. Some of us handle them better than others, and some of us are really, really shitty with them. But working on how to manage your emotions and how to get back on track if you get dysregulated, and being dysregulated is not a bad thing. It happens to all of us too. That's emotional maturity. That's what your parent probably didn't have and certainly didn't teach you. So I think that's something really, really important to hold on to too. And if you're in therapy, which I hope you are, because we all need to be in therapy, in my humble opinion, that's something to think about. How do I feel my emotions? And all you have to do is sit with them. I say that like it's easy. It's not easy to sit with your emotions sometimes, especially if you're just getting used to it. But sitting with your emotions is how you get to normalize them and understand them and realize that, they pass, they don't stay forever. You can feel that, you can notice it, you can say, by tomorrow, I probably won't be feeling this way. I'm just like a cloud floating by in the sky. It will move along. Nothing to be afraid of. If it feels scary to you, reach for help. Okay. I don't want to oversimplify this or be Pollyanna about it. Sometimes emotions can get pretty scary and you do need support. Ask for it. Get a therapist. Reach out to a friend. Go to my website, narctrauma.com. We have a trauma toolbox on there that helps if you're feeling very dysregulated. Go there and use those skills. There's help all around you. You just have to ask for it. 988, I know it's a suicide hotline, but they can help. So if emotions get really out of control, please seek help. Okay, sorry, I'm a therapist. That's just how it is. So number 9, how do I deal with them as they age, get sick, or need help? Woo, it's just been coming up a lot in the work that I do. I have to say, I was going to say, I do work with a lot of women who are in kind of past the child rearing age and into that kind of kids are off to college or about to be, and then they've got aging parents on the other end of that. So that sandwich generation they talk about. But this is tricky because many of us will already have a lot of guilt about not being there enough for our parents when we really want to have a lot of distance because of the emotional damage. Then, as they get older and their health starts failing, we feel pulled to take care of them. And that's a really hard thing to balance in your brain because, first of all, you were not cared for in a way that probably felt very good. But here you are being pulled into caring for a parent that probably still triggers you quite a bit. Even if you've done your work, you can still be triggered. You just need to take breaks. The trigger is your responsibility. You have to figure out how to handle your triggers. You can't expect other people not to trigger you because that's going to happen everywhere you go. And whomever it could be, it could just be somebody, at the grocery store. We have to be responsible to manage our own triggers, but that's especially important to keep in mind when you're around your narcissistic parent as an adult. Go in with a plan, be prepared, know how to kind of take your time outs so you can have time to kind of reset or even just, charge your batteries, whatever it is, you fill your spoons, that kind of thing. But that is a really important thing. You have to prepare yourself for time spent with them if you find yourself still being triggered. And keep in mind too, a parent who's in poor health, it's going to trigger a lot of stuff. It's not necessarily just going to trigger their need for caretaking when they were not good caretakers themselves, but it's also going to bring up grief for what you didn't have. It's going to bring up grief for what you wish you had. It's just going to bring up so much. Really prepare yourself. Prepare also to have people tell you, well, that's your dad. You have to take care of him. Why aren't you over there? And why aren't you staying? Why don't you move in with them? That kind of thing. People are going to pressure you. That's your dad. You only get one of them. That's your mom. You only get one of them. You have to do what feels right for you and what's manageable for you. If you feel that caretaking for your aging narcissistic parent is something you want to do, by all means do it. Just make sure that you protect yourself. So I hope understanding a few of these things, having maybe at least my answers to some of these things, if nothing else, leaves you with the knowledge that all of this is changeable. Right? It's never too late to start with. You can start with boundaries. You can start with, like I said, preparedness. You can start with sitting with your own emotions. There's so many tools out there to help you just kind of manage, regulate, calm yourself, meditate, all of the things that you can do. And I think one really, really important thing, maybe I'll close with this because I could go on and on. One really important thing to do, if you know the spoon theory, follow that. Know what your limit is for your resilience throughout a day. Know that when your battery is running low, that's the time to kind of retreat and rest and reset. So you've got to be paying attention to your nervous system. I will say this, I probably should have started with this actually. Our nervous systems are a mess, having been raised by a narcissistic parent. We are hypervigilant. We are self-doubting, all of the things that I said before. So all of that stuff, it creates anxiety, creates a lot of cortisol release in our body. We are on edge. Like I said before about the amygdala sounding the alarm, telling us that there's danger. That thing won't shut the hell up. That thing's going off all the time for us, right? So we really need to be paying attention to the safe times. I tell my clients this all the time. Notice moments of safety throughout your day because we really need to be teaching our nervous system what safety is and what calmness is because we have lived in this highly toxic, highly energetic in a negative way, mobile state for so long, we don't even feel safe enough to slow down typically to smell the roses, as they say, right? But these are the important things to do to regulate your nervous system, whatever you can do to regulate your nervous system. And again, on my website, I've got some tools in there that are nervous system regulation tools, narctrauma.com, and just go to trauma toolbox. But this is how you start to heal. This is how things start to change, and they change in such a big way. Your brain starts to fire differently when you start adding these tools into your life. It literally changes the way that your brain is working, which is miraculous to me. Like that is the coolest thing ever. Your brain starts firing with what you're teaching it, and then it wires this new way of thinking and believing and feeling into your brain. So if you meditate every day, if you do even just a little easy breathing exercise or whatever works for you, putting your feet in grass, I mean, just whatever, go hug a tree. All of that stuff just brings this new way of your brain firing and then wiring. And that is where your brain actually makes physical, biological changes. That is the coolest thing I think our bodies can do. So, boy, that was a lot. I hope I didn't lose anybody. I know I was getting a little technical there. I love this stuff. The neurology of the brain just floats my boat in a big way. So, all of that to say that growing up with a narcissistic parent doesn't just affect your childhood, it programs your nervous system and your relationships. So, in my class, I swear this isn't really I'm not trying to sell you on my class, but please know you're welcome if you want to join it. But in my class, we're going to be mapping out patterns, name the roles you got stuck in, and build boundaries that don't collapse the second guilt shows up. And that's a big one for a lot of us. Among other things, there are a lot of things that we'll be covering. It's 6 weeks long. It starts January 21st at 4:30 p.m. Pacific time. It'll run for 90 minutes each Wednesday for 6 weeks. So go to www.narctrauma.com if you're interested in learning more or registering, or if you want individual therapy. I work with narcissistic abuse survivors as well as all but one person in my practice. You would be in very good hands. And thank you. If you made it this far, thank you for being here. Please like and subscribe and listen for the next episode.